From the Houston Land and Water Sustainability Forum on LID design competitions, changing the way stormwater is managed. I'm going to turn it over to David. Thank you.
My name is David Batts. I'm with the Houston Land and Water Sustainability Forum and what is now the Texas Land and Water Sustainability Forum. We have expanded throughout the state, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. How many of you guys have heard this story? Show of hands. Yeah, we get around. We get around quite a bit. These days, we're actually telling the story a lot up in Washington, talking to the EPA. Bobby Dare, the sitting chair for the forum, actually just got back from the White House, talking to the White House about what we did with these design competitions and how we can prove up that low-impact development and sustainable site design is actually an economic advantage as opposed to just a water quality or floodplain mitigation or water management strategy. And I'll talk a little bit about today about how we did that and the process that we went through. But first, let me give you a little bit of background on the forum. We started the organization in 2007 with a group of interested people. And really our strategy was to, well, the real reason we did it is because we have a private business and we were tired of buying engineers box lunches and teaching them about low impact development. We saw this as a great way to get everybody involved in the community, in the design community, in the development community, and talk to them about how we could go forward in Houston and really promote low impact development. And so on a Friday afternoon at 5 o'clock, we had everybody meet us on the north side of town, not knowing if anybody was really going to show up. Basically, we had 14 or 15 people invited, and I think of those 14 or 15, we only had one not show up. And these were all high-level folks within the county, the city, ASCE, AIA, every acronym organization you saw in there, but most of them were principals of engineering firms and architecture firms. And so once we saw that everybody showed up to this event, it was just a steering committee meeting or a pre-meeting. We really knew we had something. We knew we had something special. We knew we had something that people were interested in. There were a lot of things that we agreed on, and really our primary goal and our mission statement was to enhance, enable, and integrate sustainable use of land and water for the Houston area's continued growth and economic vitality. One of the things that we all agreed on was that there was no way this was actually going to happen the way we wanted it to happen if we could not prove up that it was for Houston's continued growth and economic vitality. Now, in other places that I've talked about this, they may not care so much about growth and economic vitality as much as we do in Houston, where we're very developer friendly. But we knew that if we were going to get developers on board with this idea, if we were going to really, push the envelope, we were going to have to do it from an economic standpoint. Some of the other things that we agreed on is we knew that we couldn't continue to develop the way we were continuing to develop. Basically, let's pave the world, and where we don't have pavement, let's put a detention pond to try to deal with the management of the flood control. We knew that change was coming. We knew the EPA was starting to push regulations down towards Texas, and eventually the TCEQ was going to have to buckle, and we were going to have to deal with a lot of our stormwater related issues. And we really wanted to have a leadership role in that as opposed to have the EPA force these different ideas down our throats. We really wanted to have something we could bring to the table when that time came and said, look at what we've been doing, look at how we've been trying to figure this out, and this is what will work for this region, as opposed to have the EPA take some guidelines that came out of the Chesapeake Bay and say, this is what you're going to have to use in this region, which may not work at all. So we wanted to really have a good understanding of what we were getting ourselves into before we got involved further down the road with the EPA's and the TCEQ's involvement. So what was the state of low impact development green infrastructure adoption? Really what was the know-how prior to the design competition? There were very, very few low impact development projects going in the ground. We tried to get as many as we could, what we called low hanging fruit, which was basically lead projects that would utilize low impact development strategies to meet some of their sustainable site points. That was really all we were able to get. We've got no zoning. Obviously we like to pave everything in Houston, all concrete. There was no significant stormwater quality requirements. Basically, if we keep a Coke can or a bottle out of a storm sewer system, that was water quality. It didn't do much for nitrogen and phosphorus and all these other pollutants that we knew were bigger issues for our watershed. And then flood control was really what dominated stormwater concerns. After Allison, everybody just freaked out and decided to do detention ponds everywhere, which had some good effects and had some negative effects. And so today we're trying to deal with some of the negative effects that detention has provided us. Don't get me wrong, detention did a lot of great things for Houston as far as flooding goes, but there were a lot of things that could have been done better. After the design competition, local know-how and lid-based project counts are growing exponentially. I think we probably have somewhere in the 100 to 200 projects in either concept, design, construction, or completion in Houston right now, whereas we had maybe a dozen, probably less than a dozen before 2010. Engineering firms are moving rapidly to low-impact development focused. And these are not lead projects, these are not sustainable projects, these are everyday projects. These are apartment complexes and schools and all the other types of developments that get done because we were able to prove the economics through this process. City and county have definite bias towards lid-based public projects. I'll show you a couple of them. The cities and counties are really latching on to this idea, specifically Harris County. Harris County's gotten to the point where they go to their engineering firms if they want to do a roadway. And they say, if you can't give me a lid design, then I don't want you to be my engineer, is basically what they say. Or they'll at least tell them to go back to the drawing board and come up with another design. So they're really pushing this idea hard. Competition participants are now leaders in the new marketplace. Several of the firms are doing multiple low-impact development style projects and green infrastructure projects. And then numerous low-impact development projects in play at all scales, and we'll talk about some of those as well. So why a design competition? Prior to 2009 and 2010, and even going back to 2007, when I sat in on one of the first lid roundtable type workshops in Houston, we had a lot of people saying it'll never work here. We have really, really heavy clay soils that won't allow any infiltration. We have flat land, and we have very intense rain events. It was because of these things that engineers thought couldn't allow low-impact development, or reasons why low-impact development actually work extremely well in Houston. The clay soils actually play to our benefit. The flat land allows us to retain the water without it running off too fast. The intense rain events, it's not that big of a deal. All we're trying to do with low-impact development is try to mimic pre-development hydrology. Clay soils in heavy rain events generated a lot of runoff even in its natural environment. So when we pave over the top of it, we really don't produce that much more runoff. We produce a significant amount of runoff, but we don't produce that much more so that we can't mimic that pre-development hydrology by employing low-impact development strategies. We used peer and market pressure to get uninterested engineering community to explore lid. One of the really great things that we did by having public agencies involved in our steering committee is we could get those public agencies to pressure engineering firms to compete in the design competition. We've actually got a design competition going in Dallas right now, and we did the same thing. As of the date that we were supposed to end registration, we only had 14 teams. And so we got the city of Dallas and the city of Arlington and the city of Fort Worth to start bombarding their civil engineering firms. We extended the deadline. We picked up 6 more teams. So we have 20 teams now in our Dallas competition because we got the municipalities to really force the hand of these engineering firms, and we kind of pressured them into it. And you know, we're trying to avoid more of these missed opportunities in lead projects, and this is still something we're trying to get as many projects on as we can within these lead projects, because it's just, like I said, it's low-hanging fruit. Our goals were to leverage previous Houston Land Water Sustainability Forum educational programming. It's not like we invented this process and then had a design competition. We actually started this program in 2007, and for 2 years we did educational classes. Like I said, because personally I was tired of buying box lunches, and so this was a way we could educate people on low impact development for free, do 2-hour sessions, and bring in speakers from all over the country as well as local presenters. And so this program had gone on for about 2 years. The problem was we still we're not getting a lot of implementation. There was a lot of people becoming educated on it, but they still hadn't figured out how to sell it to their clients, or how to sell the city and the county on allowing us to push the permits through the process a little bit faster. And so we had to work through that through the design competition and then the year after. It also prompted, we also wanted to prompt the design community to determine that lid would work in Houston. That was really kind of the key. If we couldn't prove up that the hydrology worked, that the stormwater quality components worked, and most importantly that the economics worked, then we might as well just give all this up anyway, because it really didn't make a whole lot of sense for a place like Houston. We wanted to determine if lid makes sense when regulatory drivers don't exist. Whenever our water quality requirements are keeping a Coke bottle or a Coke can out of the storm sewer system. That's not really an environment that says, put low impact development everywhere. That's an environment that says, let's do the cheapest thing we can possibly do. So we knew that if we were going to be able to implement this design strategy, we were going to have to make it the cheapest thing you could possibly do. And I'll talk a lot about how we did that. And then we want to drive the widespread spread adoption and adaptation and implementation of low-impact development in the Houston area, and that we have been extremely successful with, and we'll talk a lot about that. So the traditional approach to LID as it comes from the East Coast is basically this. Public agency presses developers to do water quality of some sort, stormwater quality. The developer then engages the engineers to come up with a solution, and the engineers respond to the client. This is basically using a regulatory pressure to drive change. This is basically the stick as opposed to the carrot. Our approach, or the competition approach, was really to get the engineers engaged first. That would allow them to figure out how the system was going to work, how they could make these systems better, really be innovative in their designs. Then they would advise the developer that not only is this a better solution from a drainage and a water quality perspective, but it's going to save you money. The developer then starts questioning the agency and saying, you know, why can't we do this? Why are you becoming a hindrance for us to do something that is beneficial to everyone? It's got this triple bottom line. And then the public agency has to respond to the pressure that's given. Now, in the way we organize things through the forum in Austin and in Dallas and in Houston, and in San Antonio now, we actually try to get the public agencies involved in the process so that when it comes time to the developer to ask for it, the agency is ready to provide that assistance so that these things are taken care of. And that was one key factor that really helped us out a lot in Houston, and it's helping us out a lot in Dallas right now as well, and it will in San Antonio and Austin. So how was it structured? The design competition, we wanted to use real properties with challenging conditions. We didn't want to find the easiest property that existed. And one of our design partners was Misher Development. They were a big development firm in Houston and throughout Texas. They had this really nice piece of property in the Woodlands. The problem with the Woodlands is the Woodlands sits on a very small sliver of the Houston area that sits on sand, a combination of sand and clay. That was pretty easy for it, and it had terrain. That was a pretty easy scenario for an engineering firm to design a low-impact development in that state. And if they had done so, and they had done so successfully, then everybody could have said, well, that project was in the Woodlands. It's not going to work anywhere else. It's only going to work in that little small section of the Houston area. So what we did was we went back to them and said, no, could you find us something that has poor drainage, flat piece of land, really not good for anything? And so they gave us 640 acres in the Katy Prairie. And so, it was kind of the opposite. They basically gave us a property that was designed to flood as opposed to one that was had a lot of great drainage characteristics. So we wanted properties that were obviously really challenging so that nobody could go back and say, well, it worked on that property because. We wanted to be able to show that if it works on this property, it will work on any property in the region. We wanted to have key players. They had to have skin in the game, so we really focused on designers, developers, planners, city, county folks. We really wanted it to be meaningful progress. We wanted it to really make a lot of sense for everybody. And then we focused on runoff reduction and attenuation. And like I said before, that was really the big driver for change in Houston for anything was flood control. And so, whereas in the rest of the country, everybody kind of looked at the 2-year and the 5-year storm for low-impact development. Nobody had really ever looked at how would low-impact development function in an extreme rain event or a 100-year flow. And we were able to show extreme reductions in the 100-year flow with the use of low-impact development. This is a hydrograph based on a traditional LID development up in the Northeast. You can see the purple line is actually a developed condition, curb and gutter style community with pipes and inlets. The blue line is a low impact, one of the first low impact developments that was actually studied. This graph is the pre-development and post-development curve for the White Oaks and Braes Bayou watershed. The blue line is the way it currently was pre-Allison, which was year 2000. The red line is 1915. So what we want to do with low-impact development is mimic that 1915 hydrograph. And so you can see what we're trying to accomplish here. And this is something we're seeing on just about every low-impact development project that's being designed and installed right now in Houston. We're seeing these results. We're seeing actually a decrease in peak discharge for the pre-development runoff rate, which is pretty significant. The first project that or one of the projects that we worked on, I'll kind of go through some of the properties that we had, was a green roadway called Independence Parkway. Remember I told you that we wanted the worst properties possible? Well, this one was right down here in the heart of the museum district. No, I'm just kidding. It was in the heart of the refinery district. Basically ran down to the San Jacinto Monument. Flat land elevation was about 5, so right at sea level. We're really close to it. An area that when hurricanes come through, flood out pretty badly, and we end up flooding the streets in these areas a lot. One of the things that we learned through the design competition is by utilizing low impact development, we could deal with the 100-year storm and not flood out the 2 lanes of the street. So we ended up with 4 accessible lanes for emergency vehicles to go back and forth. And it's because our storm sewer systems in Houston are typically designed to handle the 2-year storm. We pipe water to a detention facility that handles the 100-year storm. What low impact development allowed us to do by allowing us to put center median swales in is deal with the 100-year storm right where the water hit the ground. So we didn't have to pipe the water anywhere. We dealt with the 100-year storm right when it hit the ground, which kept us from flooding out the streets. So that was a huge deal. Not only that, but now the county doesn't have to buy 5 or 10 acres to build a big detention pond. They get it in there right away. The urban redevelopment was the Bastrop Promenade. This was basically a small section, or basically a 5-block section that runs south of our new soccer stadium that just finished completion. During this time, nobody knew where the soccer stadium was going to end up. They thought it might end up here, but there was kind of a political football at the time. So we really didn't get as many entries that we had hoped on this development because of that. Nobody knew if it was going to be built or not. But still, we got great results out of it on how you can do an urban redevelopment and decrease the amount of runoff. One of the great examples that we got out of this was that one of the teams had looked at a traditional versus low impact development. The traditional design to drain this would have required a 72-inch RCP pipe. The low impact development design that they came up with required a 30-inch PVC pipe. So imagine the downstream water body that has to receive that amount of water. Do you want them receiving the 72-inch pipe or the 36-inch pipe or the 30-inch pipe? You know, it's just a huge difference in the amount of water that's going to leave the site, and it really extends the life of our municipalities, which are aging, their infrastructure that's in place. And then our suburban residential, I kind of told you guys a little bit about this. This was a 640-acre parcel along the I-10 corridor. Basically, again, probably one of the worst possible scenarios we could have come up with. So how was it structured still? We really wanted to focus on cost versus traditional design. So how does low impact development stack up against traditional design? The economics were extremely important in driving change. We wanted to promote integrated design teams. We kind of stole this from LEED. LEED does what's called a charrette at the beginning of a design, where basically before they even put pen to paper, the architect, the civil engineer, landscape architect, the MEP, the entire design team sits down around a table and comes up with their goals. We really wanted to promote the same idea with low impact development, because what we see a lot of times is that a land planner or an architect will get an idea and they'll throw everything on paper and then they'll hand it to their landscape architect or their civil engineer after everything's kind of set in stone. And so their engineer and the landscape architect have to design around their design. Well, with the low impact development concept, that's really, really difficult because it needs to be integrated so much into the original land plan. So what we wanted to do is get landscape architects, civil engineers, and architects used to working together in that sort of capacity. We also had a 2-stage judging process. We had expert judges that came from across the country in key disciplines. They made up 80% of the finalists' total score, and I'll show you some pictures from that in a little while. And then we had a finals jury, and this was more of a beauty contest because it only made up for 20% of the total score. But we did actually have one of the competitors jump from second place into first place because of this process. But this is really where the finalists were able to sell their idea to their clients. We had developers and political dignitaries just throughout our entire panel. We had about 20 people. In Dallas, we're hoping to get the mayors of Arlington, the mayors of Fort Worth, and the mayor of Dallas on our judging panel as well. And so we're in the process of trying to make that happen. And then we had this really high-profile finals event. The expert judges, we were trying to influence both the people who really got it and the people that maybe didn't so much. So we had some very old-school engineers in the room looking at it, as well as some more progressive people from around the area and around the country. We really kind of lucked out. We had Art Story, who basically runs Harris County, and then we had Steve Costello, who at the process was running for city council and won city council. So we were really able to influence some pretty high-ranking people within the city and county. From planning and development to launch, it only took us 5 months, and that's kind of the same track we're on in Dallas. Registration opened in September. Registration closed November 7th, and then our finals event was on January 27th. We really didn't even start, we didn't even come up with this concept until June of this year. So we only had about 3-4 months to plan this event and put it on. So it can happen really fast. The one in, like I said, in Dallas, we're on about a 9-month timetable. So I think we started the process in February or March, and we're hoping the finals event's going to be in November 7th. So if you're in that area, you guys should look for it. So what did it cost? Everybody asked, what did it cost? We raised $45,000 for 3 $15,000 prizes for each of the categories. We had a developer, Misher Investments, obviously put forth $15,000 for their property. And ASCE and AIA Houston also put forth $15,000. We also raised $7,500 from a nonprofit that was interested, the Biopreservation Association, that was really interested in this concept. We collected $250 for each team's registration fees, and then we collected $50 for a seat and $1,000 per table for the finals event tickets. The balance at the end of the competition is we actually made $12,500. That has allowed us to put on a lot of educational sessions since then, as well as do we actually put together a program that helped write a low impact development and green infrastructure guidance manual. As far as statistics and demographics go, there were 22 submitting teams. In Dallas, we had 20. I was really expecting Dallas to outdo Houston because there's so many more engineering firms up there in the different cities, but more of them teamed up than in Houston. We had 9 on the green roadway. We had 4 on the urban redevelopment, 9 on the suburban residential. We had 42 firms represented. As of today, we have 51 firms represented in the Dallas competition. And then we had 230 plus local professionals involved. We ended up having a little more cooperation throughout the country. We had people from Illinois, North Carolina, Georgia, Colorado, California, and Kansas involved in this competition, which I think we only have maybe 3 or 4 states represented in the Dallas area. At the finals event, we tried to make it big. We tried to make it fun. We tried to make it exciting. We did a networking event prior to the actual finals event, where set up at the Rice Ballroom, where we had everybody's posters set up, all 22 teams. So there were 44 posters set up around the entire event, so people could talk and show show people their designs. Engineers could network. We had over 350 people at this event. And you can see a couple of pictures. This is the Vice President of Development for Misher Investments, that you see here looking at one of the designs. And you can see this is the ballroom, and just about as far back as you can see their heads. We ended up selling 10 tables, which we didn't know if we'd sell any, so that was pretty exciting as well. Here's some of the folks that we had from at the jury table. That's a commissioner in Houston, or a former commissioner. She got voted out in the last round, which kind of a bummer for us because she was really excited about this. There was one of the teams that submitted kind of a windy road that kind of just took little bends, and in the bends they had rain gardens, and she really wanted a windy road. I was really sad that she got voted out before she could get her windy road, but it was a really cool design. One of the things that we wanted to do is we wanted to get the most bang for our buck, and so since we only had three categories, we wanted to try to shove as many finalists in to speak as we could. And it'd be kind of boring if we had engineers up talking for 20 minutes about their design idea, right? Everybody would fall asleep. So we figured we'd make it exciting, and one of the ladies on our design competition subcommittee said, well, why don't we do what's called a lightning round presentation, where you basically take the remote from them, they have to automate everything, and their voice has to match the slides, and they only get 7 minutes. And once the screen goes black, they're cut off. And it was like, wow, that's a great idea. What that allowed us to do is put 9 finalists through, whereas if we would have done 20 minutes each, we may have only been able to maybe get 2 each, if it even been hard at that, because it would have extended so long. So the 7-minute presentation really made it a lot of fun, and you can actually go on our website and see the presentations. One of the things that we did was we dubbed the voices over, because we recorded the voices that night, and because the slides were already automated, you could put in PowerPoint, you could put the voices directly over the PowerPoint slides, and so you can hear them speak the presentation as it progresses through the presentation. So it's really neat. It's something that people still watch today, and we're still talking about today. But you can see we were able to get quite a few design teams up here. Were there any surprises? There were some designs that were really, really good. There were some that were just way out there. I hate to say this, but there were some designs that would have done really well in Austin, but didn't stand a chance in Houston, just because they just took some concepts that wouldn't be so progressive in a place like Austin as they would have been in a place like Houston. Like one of them had shared gardens in everybody's backyard. Cool idea, great concept, not going to happen in Houston. We don't like each other that much. But some really neat concepts. But again, we had some pretty conservative people in our expert judging, and so those didn't fare so well. Expert judging, there were quite a few nuances, and there was a lot of educational opportunity in there with the finals event. It was a room full of electricity. I mean, it was really a lot of fun. I'm telling you, people still talk about this thing all over the country. It's unbelievable. I don't even know how people even know about it, a lot of them. Within the finals jury, I think a lot of them had an epiphany. I know a lot of the developers we had on the panel are developing using low impact development now. One of the biggest in-town builders, in-town homes or love-it homes, they run under both, was on the jury panel, and he just built his first low impact development townhome community, and it's I guess maybe the first 5 houses have sold so far. So people are buying houses. That's shocking. But there's others that are coming on board as well. Like we're working on a 90-acre suburban residential development in Fort Bend County. We're working on the biggest low-impact development in the country, and probably one of the biggest developments in the country. The new ExxonMobil campus and the new Spring Woods development on the north side of town. That's all low-impact development. And a lot of this stuff is coming out because of some of the efforts we've made along the way. One juror's epiphany, the EPA, we tried to get them to fund this program, and I don't know if we never got to the right person or it just never really got to where we wanted it to get to, but they wanted to participate, and so kind of at the last minute they flew this guy down named Dove Whiteman, and he was the chief non-point source control branch of the EPA, and he had flown down here, probably didn't know what he was getting into, going down to Texas of all places to hear about low impact development of all things, and when he left, he really had a great thing to say about what we had done, and he had mailed this to 200-300 people of his closest friends, and so that's probably why everybody knows about what we're doing now, is because he did such a good job of promoting it after the fact. So can economics really act as a driver? What we learned is, without question, every single design team, with the exception of one, whether they went berserk and went crazy with some crazy new concept or they did something that was a lot more traditional, saw a 10 to 30% cost savings in using low impact development. The only one that showed an increase in price was because they used a purple pipe rainwater harvesting system throughout the 640 acre development, and even with that they were able to show a 6-year return on investment. So we got some really great economic results out of this, and we're continuing to see economic results as we continue building this way. And like I said, it's really the only available driver in the Houston area is economics, and so what we had, like I said, we had to prove that was going to work. Other consistent results, major reductions in runoff are very possible. Typically, we were seeing anywhere from a 30 to 60% reduction in peak flows from the traditional design to the low impact development design, and in most instances, we were also seeing a reduction in flows from pre-development high peak flows versus low impact development. And then the other thing we were starting to have that we've kind of had happen since then is very, very, very conservative engineering firms that there's no way they would ever believe this was going to work are now promoting low impact development. There was one firm we went and visited with after the fact, after the design competition was over. They placed second in the residential one, and we asked them, what was something that you guys learned through this process? And their answer was, we learned that it worked. They said when they ran the hydraulic analysis, they actually ran it 8 times because they didn't believe it the first 7. They thought they were wrong. They thought they had messed something up. And then when they ran the economics, they did the exact same thing. We're like, we've got to be missing something. There's got to be something missing in this design because this is so much cheaper. Why haven't we been doing this all along? And I think one of the biggest sighs of relief at the finals event was whenever the design teams went around and they looked at everybody's poster and everybody got the same answer or somewhat close to the same answer. There wasn't anything. It wasn't like they were the only one that found these results. All 22 teams had found these results. So what was the overall impact? It drove a make it happen now approach in local government as well as design community. Two of the oldest civil engineering firms, Edminster Henshaw Russ and Associates and Walter P. Moore, who turned 74 and 75 last year in Houston, are probably doing more low impact development based design than anyone in the state, I'd be able to say. Collaborative working relationships between disciplines are bearing fruit in terms of holistic design. We're starting to see better designs. Now there's still some hiccups in that, don't get me wrong, that's still a problem, and we're dealing with it on the Spring Woods development. It's a great example, a big development where we're dealing with this very issue. But they're fixing it and they're coming together and starting to make some of these things happen. And then like I said, there's a major move to low impact development in all types of development. One of the other things that we knew we had to do after the low impact development competition was we need to figure out a way to expedite LID permitting and implementation. If we couldn't do this and it was going to take more time to do a LID project, we knew developers still weren't going to be interested in doing this. So we needed to eliminate the fear of delay for developers. We needed to deal with obstacles in the code. We needed to come up with an interim low impact development design guide. And the reason we say interim is because we don't want to write new code around something we still don't really know. We still hadn't really used low impact development, so how do you write new code around something you haven't used? And municipalities over the country do that. They write code around something they don't really know anything about. They kind of steal an idea from Portland, or they steal an idea from Maryland, and it might not work. It might not work in Texas. It might not work in your region, and not even in just Texas. It may not work in Houston. It may not work in Austin, San Antonio, or Dallas. All these regions are so different. You really have to look at it on a region by region basis. And in doing this, we wanted to come up with a way to expedite the permitting process and really kind of create a friendly environment for developers and design teams to work with the county. We wanted to drive rapid implementation, and then we wanted a future code to be based on interim experience. So whenever it comes time to write new code next year, we're going to have a whole bunch of projects that allow us to look at low impact development, what worked, what didn't work, and come up with new code based on those ideas. And if we wrote a good interim guide, we may not have to make a lot of changes. If we realize we've screwed up, then we can make some changes based on what we now know. And this is Harris County's low impact development, green infrastructure design criteria, and stormwater management interim design guide. One of the great things about this is actually a collaborative effort with flood control and Harris County. So that was really exciting for us because it was actually able to get them to work together. The one thing we really missed in this was getting the city of Houston involved. They wanted to wait until it came time to write new code before they got involved, but that's coming up shortly, so hopefully they'll adopt this manual. Fort Bend County has adopted this manual, or is at least allowing developers to use this manual as a guideline for LID. We're working with Montgomery County and Brazoria County and some other counties to do the same thing. It's actually a really good manual because it's very loosely written. It allows for a lot of safety, but it also allows for engineers to be innovative. That's one of the things we really try to promote is the innovation of engineers. They came to Texas A&M for a reason, and that was to get their engineering degree so they could be engineers and not people that just take details off of a plan sheet and plug and play. So it really allows them to be innovative in their designs and come up with new technologies and new ways to do things. And that's something that's really flourishing in Houston right now. There's not a lot of prescription in here. It doesn't say your engineered media has to meet this certain specification. It gives them performance specifications as opposed to prescriptive specifications. And that was something we saw as extremely important in the adoption and implementation. 2010 to 2012, here's some of the projects that were being worked on and are since. I'll show you some names of those projects in a little while. One of the other things is we've been able to have a major influence on other Texas cities. Like I said, we've got a North Texas version right now, a Central Texas, a San Antonio is just getting started. We had the steering committee meeting last month. Or no, 2 weeks ago, had the first steering committee meeting. We're going to go ahead and move forward with a design competition in San Antonio. The one in North Texas obviously is already underway. The one in Central Texas, we're kind of holding off. The Central Texas Regional Mobility Authority put together a design competition in 2011. And so we're kind of waiting on that to settle out before we do a design competition in Austin. So in the meantime, we're trying to get together and come up with a lot of great educational programming that we can put together. Again, that's something free that we do. And then we just launched the Texas Land Water Sustainability Forum website. We partnered up with the Lady Bird Johnson Wildflower Center, and we kind of stole their texaslid.org site, and we combined the lwsforum.org site, and you can get to it either way, texaslid.org or lwsforum.org. One of the reasons we partnered with them was, one, that the website was dead, but they also had a GIS mapping tool that allowed us to basically map every low impact development project in Texas. And so in 2013, we're going to do a major effort to try to get all the cities in the state of Texas, maybe do a competition or something fun like that, to where we see who can submit the most LID projects to the GIS database, so that we have a really good example of how much we're actually doing in Texas. Beyond Texas, there's design competitions going on in Philadelphia and Lancaster and Virginia. There's one going or being in the works in DC and Pennsylvania. I mean, they're sprouting up all over the country. Kansas City, we just talked to about doing a design competition. So it's really, really exciting what's going on with these things. And you know, it came out of Houston of all places. I mean, that's just crazy. Yeah, exactly. Everybody laughs. So will winning entries be built? You know, there's a couple questions that I always get asked. Will winning entries be built? Yes and no. None of the actual properties have been built yet, but Harris County has started building green roadways, and they are giving those green roadway contracts to engineering firms that competed in the design competition, because who has the experience? Nobody's really done a LID project prior to the design competition. The design competition is the only experience anybody has in LID, therefore they are the experts, so they get the jobs. Is a LID design competition a good tool to drive innovation and adoption? Absolutely. In Houston, one of the things that we were tasked with was trying to come up with the best way to build biofiltration systems, so it made sense for the county from a maintenance perspective. The community, the engineering community got together and we came up with the best solution. So innovation is being driven forward in Houston because of this design competition. Will we do it again? We don't know yet. Depends on how worn out we are after Dallas, San Antonio, and then when we finally get to Austin again. We talked about doing another one in 2012. I don't know if we will. I don't know if we'll gain anything more out of doing another one, because we've gotten so much out of this. So I don't know if it'll just be white noise. Yeah, who knows? We'll see what happens. And then what would you do differently? We would have done a universal format for economic comparison data. One of the things we didn't do was put together a bid sheet for the finalists to fill out, so that we had consistent economic data. So the economic data we got was all over the board. Some people just lump sum priced it. Some people broke it out into every single category for infrastructure and landscaping and everything else. So in the Dallas competition, I actually created a bid sheet that allows us to compare apples to apples, so that when we write a white paper on it and show our results from the design competition, we can show line item bid pricing for all the different components, or at least lump sum pricing for the major components. So that was something that was really important to us, that we're doing in these future programs. Other lessons learned, pressure from peers and local governments got participants to the game. That was something we re-emphasized in Dallas. The opportunity to learn by doing it was critical to accelerating adoption. One of the nice things that we had a lot of engineering firms tell us after the fact was that this gave them a no-risk opportunity to design using low-impact development. And when I say no risk, it wasn't going to be built the way they designed it. They didn't have to seal it. They didn't have to put their name on it. They just had to come up with a concept and an idea and prove that it was going to work. Now, whenever they finally, developer finally comes to them and they prove to themselves that it works, then they have to do a little more work, but they already have a good baseline example of what they've got to do to make the process work. And then the last thing was LID is superior design approach, even when water quality is a secondary goal. Like I said before, low impact development was designed as a water quality based solution for the Chesapeake Bay area, and it's kind of spread out throughout the country as that. In Houston, where we're trying to keep those Coke cans out, water quality was a secondary goal, flood control was the primary goal, and it still worked. And really economics was really the primary goal, and that was, we definitely saw the results that we were looking for there. 1 year later, we ended up having a really cool networking event at the local brewery. And in order to get into the local brewery for free beer, we made them answer this survey. 1 year later, so what was this question? I didn't make this PowerPoint. He forgot the question. What was the question? It was I think it was how many of you are using low impact development today? We had roughly 60% say yes, 40% say no. That's a significant increase. One of the things we didn't do that I need to do in Dallas before I forget is do the same survey before the design competition and one after the design competition. Oh, there's the question. That would have been important to have. Have you had opportunities to implement LID since the competition? What obstacles have you experienced in designing or permitting a lid project? Over 20% said none. Developer ignorance was a big one. Permitting agencies, it was only 10-12%. Civil engineers and architects or landscape architects were still fighting among themselves, but there were a couple issues that came into play. How receptive had your clients been to lid concepts? Roughly 70% said either they were very receptive or receptive/interested. So this gave us a good feel on how the development community felt about the process. So what's going on in Houston today? A lot of really great projects, a lot of roadway projects we're doing because we're not having to dig that off-site detention facility anymore. We're not flooding our streets anymore. There's a significant cost savings going along with it. But this is just a small list that I was able to fit on the sheet. There's a continuation that continues to go down there. There's a lot of school districts that are utilizing low-impact development, a lot of LEED projects, but most of these that are on this list have nothing to do with LEED. Most of them are purely lid-based because of the economic drivers. This is Bagby Street that's being done. I think the City of Houston has about 6 projects that they've got in the pipeline to implement low-impact development. This particular design was kind of a street tree design. It was an urban redevelopment. They wanted to implement street trees along with bioretention and biofiltration. And so you can see it's about 10 blocks of Bagby Street where they're utilizing these planter boxes. You can see the planter boxes are outlined in that dark black line. And this is basically what it's going to look like after it's done. This is under construction right now, and these are other places in the country that have these, and this is basically the concept and what it's going to look like. The water runs through the gunnels and into the planter boxes and then overflow into a typical inlet. A couple other examples. So we're starting to see this stuff happen in Texas, which is really exciting. This is Birnam Drive. This was the first, as far as I know, this is the first green roadway in Texas. Basically, you can see it actually has 2 swales. There's a whole nother section, but this is about 1,500 feet of it that you see here. And then here's some pictures of it today. They just opened it last month, so this is able to be driven on. So you can see the berms that are up. They actually use a traditional curb styling, but they ended up putting these false back inlets in. I think I've got a picture of them in here. You can see here's the false back inlets that allow the water to run through. The county was kind of concerned about cars catching their wheels on the curb cuts, and so they use this type of strategy as opposed to the curb cuts or allowing sheet flow. And then this was a retrofit. This was actually an engineering firm, of all people, that were wanting to basically practice what they preached and show how low-impact development could be retrofitted into an existing parking lot. And I have to admit, this was like the best scenario you could ever ask for. This was a little conference center / engineering office. Everything already kind of sloped towards a center concrete flume and then drained down to an inlet. And so what they did was they basically cut the concrete out away from the building and cut a center strip out of their driveway and put in bioswales. But one of the really neat things as it relates to timing and time of concentration is they timed the water from the time the water left the downspout to the time it made it to the inlet. Before was about 3 minutes. Today it's about 15 minutes. So we were able to drastically decrease the amount of time it took the water to run off of that rooftop and into the storm sewer system. Based on this design, they would not have had to dig a detention pond. They would have been able to get all the detention, and they would extend that time of concentration enough to where they would not have had to build a detention pond for this particular site. This is the Spring Woods development. You can see here the Exxon campus is just north of here. But you can see this particular development has their own code and requires low-impact development to be used if a developer wants to come build in here, which is a really cool idea. All the roadways, Energy Drive, Hallsworth, Springwoods Village Parkway, every single one of the roadways implement both bioswales, and they also have a 50-foot tree easement for water to flood into the tree easement so that they can manage their stormwater throughout this entire development. So it's a really, really cool project that I guess we've still got a ways before it's going to be finished, but the roadways are being built right now, and even some of the property owners that are starting to buy properties in here are about to start building and start breaking ground on development in there as well. Like I said before, the North Texas Low Impact Development Design Competition is underway, so I don't know what I'm really advertising here, but the San Antonio Design Competition we're planning on launching Probably we're really going to start working on it this month and next, and then we're hoping to launch it either August or November, about the time the Dallas competition wraps up, and then it'll probably run through the spring of 2013. So be looking for that as well, and the results that come from it. As far as resources go, you can go to the Houston LWSforum.org if you want to see any of the design competition entries from our competition. You can also go to LWSforum.org or TexasLid.org for the state chapter, or the state website that has all the different chapters. We're still updating that and working on that, but it might be something you guys are interested in as well. Any questions from anybody? Is this something that you guys in your municipalities might be interested in doing? If we haven't talked about your municipality yet, being the 4 big cities. Any questions beyond that? All right. Yes.
Hey, David. I just wanted to point out that we, a couple of years ago, we went to the Bagby Preservation Association's, conference, if you will, and they did a presentation on this event. It was absolutely amazing. They did such a good job. Bob and Aaron was a part of it, big part of it there. But at that particular point in time, I took a picture of a slide that they put up on, the screen, and it said, "We were surprised when we got the hydrology modeling, but when we saw the economics, we were stunned." I called my guys in last Friday and told them that we were pitching our new projects this way. Principal, one of Houston's most prominent old school civil engineer firms.
Right.
So he was actually up there, and he was like, "I didn't believe it," and then we did, just like what you said.
Yeah.
And what's so amazing about that association, the Bagby Preservation Association, is that they've got this systemic sustainability. I mean, they're moving with it. And there's not much outside funding, funding that's actually being required to really carry on the good work that's been done on the forefront. So.
Right. I think the only project in Houston that's got 319 grant funding is Cottage Grove. I think they got a $1 million grant, and that project's under design right now, using a lot of the same technologies we learned in the design competition. I think Jones and Carter are the ones that are working on that one. And again, that's one of the oldest school engineering firms in Houston. And without saying too much, I remember sitting at the very first LID workshop I ever sat in. It was actually my first day even working in stormwater. It was at St. Thomas University, and Bob Jones was up there, and he was basically saying this will never work in Houston. 3 years later, his team his group is in the design competition, basically saying it'll work, and then 2 years after that, his team is actually designing using low impact development. So that's how quickly minds can change, just if you can prove the economics. I mean, really, that's what it comes down to, is if we can prove that this is less expensive, then we're going to show great results. One of the apartment complexes that's going in town right now, one of the economic drivers to that was because of the size of the detention pond, and every region is going to have different drivers and economic drivers. For us, it's detention. But this site was only able to get 7 apartment buildings on the site because they had a massive detention pond they were going to have to do. They went to one of the design teams that won the design competition in the residential development and said, "Could you give me a design that would allow me to pick up 2 more buildings so this is viable?" And they did so. They used porous pavers in all the parking stalls. They used rain gardens and biofiltration in all the common areas and the green spaces, and they were able to add 2 additional buildings, which was able to make the project viable, even given the added cost of the porous pavements. And again, I mean, it was all because the economics ended up making sense. It wasn't a lead site. It wasn't, they weren't doing it for any other reason other than to get those 2 additional buildings. And 2 additional buildings, yeah, that's great for the developer, but that's also great for density. It gives us more density to our properties, which means this developer's not going to have to buy another piece of property where the detention pond's going to eat up his density on that lot as well. But yeah, I mean, great point. And that's something that we're seeing a lot of. I mean, it's really eye-opening, and we can't wait to expand it throughout the rest of the state as these other design competitions finish up. Yes, ma'am.
Have you heard a lot of movement from more arid parts of the states about? I saw that there was some conference while they were aridly focused, but have you seen any of that information and where it's spreading out west on the tech?
When you say arid, are you thinking Austin, San Antonio, or El Paso?
El Paso, San Angelo.
I was invited out to El Paso to speak at the ASCE conference about this a couple years back, And you know, the ASC was really pushing this idea, but no one really showed up. So I'm not sure if it's really made it that far yet. And I'm sure it will eventually, but again, I don't really know what the drivers are there. I don't know if water quality is a big deal up there. I don't know if flooding's a big deal there. I'm not real sure what the driver's going to be, but it'll have to get there eventually because I think the EPA is going to force it on everyone. I know that's really their big push is green infrastructure right now. But yeah, I'm not sure. I know there's probably interest. I just don't know if it's made it that far as implementation goes. Good question. Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Does this competition only deal with undeveloped land, or would it be feasible to look at like a creek that has been extremely urbanized and get civil engineers to work on the techniques for that?
No, that's a really good question. We've actually, when we did the one in Houston, it was all about, let's just find 3 common properties and 3 common problems. Now that we've probably dealt with the 3 most common, as we're going into these other cities, we're giving them the option to try to find properties that are like that, because what we did in Dallas was we didn't have properties that we just had in mind we were just going to use. What we did instead is we did a call for properties, where we actually wrote a letter and had the North Central Texas Council of Governments and all the cities send this letter out to their developers and all the cities in the region to see what properties we got back. And we got about 12 properties back, which was really exciting because we hadn't done this before. We didn't know if anybody would participate. We didn't know if anybody would get excited about it. And we got 12 properties back. We didn't end up with a creek restoration, but that was one of the ones we had on our list that would have been really neat to do. We just haven't found that opportunity yet. We're actually partnering with the San Antonio River Authority on the San Antonio project. They're the ones that are actually helping push it forward, as opposed to me having to travel so much like I'm doing in Dallas. But I have a feeling that there's a chance that might be able to be one of the categories. I'm hoping that they consider it. I don't know if we'll find the right project to make it work, but I'm hoping that they'll consider it, because that's a great idea, and it's something we've definitely thought about, because it'd be great to take an old concrete channel and redevelop it and fix it basically and take it back to its natural state. Yeah, thanks. That's a good question too. It's definitely something we want to do. Anybody else? All right, thank you guys. I appreciate y'all's time. Thank you.